Hi everybody, Michael, thank you so much for being here. So one of the things we try and do with this conference is just try and keep up with what's going on in the world of HR, how it's changing year by year. So I kind of just wanted to kick off by getting your thoughts kind of from the CHRO perspective. What kind of the three big priorities this year do you think when you think about what you've been working on, what you hear from your colleagues at other firms? Well, what are the things that are really kind of energizing people at the moment?
Very good. Well, thank you first for being here. It's wonderful to be sitting up there and just listening to all the great speakers and the content that we have here. The other thing I would just mention, this building is named after John Huntsman. And Mastercard, our vice chair, is actually John Huntsman, the son of John Huntsman that came here. So I feel a close affinity here already. So anyway, in terms of priorities for CHROs at the moment, I would break them down into like three big themes. First one is around geopolitical and regulatory topics. Every one of the CHROs I speak to are talking about how their company is thinking about geopolitical risk, as well as regulatory change, whether it's specific to people and HR, so things like pay transparency laws, or what we're seeing with the changes with DEI, as an example, the executive orders, how they're working through those particular aspects to ensure that they're meeting the needs of their business, their stakeholders, including the employees as well. So that's really a big one. And at the moment, if you think about the word tariffs, and we heard one of the speakers earlier.
Beautiful word, I'm told.
Yeah. Even that one, what are the implications from a human capital perspective? And they're quite significant. And every company is thinking through their playbook. What are the implications for their business? What are the implications from a cost perspective? And you would find that most organizations, the CFO and the CHRO, are talking about if we need to pull the levers, which levers can we pull, either to increase sales, change the supply chain, or reduce cost, which inevitably, in some cases, is redeploying assets and human capital from one location to the other, or slowing down or stopping hiring. So there are implications there. So geopolitical and economic and regulatory risk is certainly number one. The second one is around skills. So upskilling and reskilling. And obviously a lot of the discussions today around data, analytics, AI, have all got implications around how we're thinking about our workforce for the future, and what investments we need to make in terms of upskilling and reskilling our workforce to embrace all of the changes and the technological disruptions that are happening. And look, skilling and upskilling and reskilling has always been a theme, but I think it's just been accelerated with the advent of AI in particular. And the third one, I would say, is really around culture and well-being, and thinking about health and civility in the workplace. And the reason why I sort of bucket those ones together, because they're all interrelated in some way. So just recently, and those of you that are working in HR at the moment, you know that there is an increasing focus in terms of the cost of healthcare, and most companies are self-insured. And when you look at your data as it relates to healthcare and health insurance premiums, they tend to be going up. And what I saw last year in our own organisation, the area, particularly on the pharmaceuticals and prescription drugs, particularly ones related to diabetes, GLP-1, those kinds of drugs, there's been clearly an uptick there. And so when you're going to your CFO and saying, look, we need to add additional cost, not just because our workforce is growing, but just because the cost of health insurance is going up, your CFO is always going to say, what else can we be doing? How else can we be mitigating some of these costs, and at the same time providing good value and coverage for our employees? And so recently a group of CHROs, we were having discussions around GLP-1 as an example, and the advent of telemedicine and a whole range of different things. But the whole premise around this discussion was around, at the moment, some organizations are not subsidizing GLP-1 drugs. And the premise that has come from one organization is around, yes, we know from a financial perspective, the cost is going to go up in the short to medium term, but over the long term, if the GLP-1 drug does what it's meant to do, and actually providing better health and so forth for individuals, then obviously the overall cost will come down. So that's a question, and I'm not advocating one way or the other, but I just think it's another theme for our organizations to contend with. And this point around civility and discourse in organizations, given everything that's going on, there is one question that there is a survey around, how do I feel? Like, do I feel calm lately? And in that particular question, do I feel calm lately? From 2019 to today, it's been going down by 11%, even before the pandemic. So within our workforce as well, there is a sense of unrest that I think from a HR perspective, we need to sort of put our arms around and say, what can we be doing to really ensure that our team feel that we're there together with them?
Kind of feel like we should be identifying the people who say that they're actually feeling calm and kind of just like, what do we need to know from you?
I agree.
Are you awake, maybe also? But, I mean, I'm kind of curious, you mentioned the geopolitical instability. I mean, I think global organization like Mastercard, and I know we've taught like location strategy and thinking, who do we put where, has been something that kind of, the highest levels, kind of the HR you've been thinking about. Clearly, always there are questions about, how much does it cost to hire people, what skills are available there. Are we seeing new factors come into play now as we think about those decisions? Yeah,
like earlier on, you're right. Location strategy for most organizations was really a wage arbitrage question. It was around where can we get good value and labor costs at better rates than some of the central locations that we have. And so that still plays a factor. But increasingly, from our perspective, I know many of your global organizations are thinking about this, is around where are the skills? And so we at Mastercard, with our data analytics team, we've actually put together a location model, which basically provides a series of inputs into that model. So things like language, education, labor laws, obviously labor cost, and a whole range of other factors, unions, works council, those kinds of things, to determine whether a particular location would be favorable for the kinds of jobs that we're hiring. So, for example, we have opened up offices a few years ago in Bogota, in Colombia, because there are particular skill sets there on data, consulting services that are important for our business. Equally in Portugal, we've opened up a hub there and expanded it. So we are using these tools and these data to help us better inform where can we move away from a centralized model but decentralize and ensure that we've got coverage and not a concentration risk in one particular geography or other, depending on the circumstance. So that helps us tremendously from I would say a workforce planning perspective, as well as a cost mechanism as well.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the workforce planning piece. It's something I've always wrestled with is kind of when you look at building capabilities, it takes a long time to hire people, it takes a long time to train people. And so you kind of think you want to be planning 2-3 years ahead. At the same time, you turn on the news and the world's going like that, and it's going like that. And so everybody's thinking, oh my God, what do we have to change for the next week, let alone the next quarter? I mean, you're known for having kind of strong planning processes. How do you build processes that are useful and really guide you and have a long-term perspective, but then actually make them useful given, again, everybody always says, oh, we live in uncertain times. But I think we can kind of really say at the moment that, yes, we do live on uncertain times. how do you balance that kind of need for investment with the level of uncertainty we're facing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, the whole talent planning aspect for Mastercard, it's not an event. It really is a system that we've developed over the years, all the way from, candidate sourcing, all the way through to the offboarding and off-ramping as well. And we look at everything in between. So things like, if we think about where we're now at this time of year, typically in the spring, we do our talent planning. And we focus a lot of time and effort thinking about where is the business going, where is it today, do we have the skills that we need to be successful? So there is always a focus around a skills audit to think about where potentially we may have gaps. And so for Mastercard over the last few years, the areas that we've been investing heavily in has been around data, data analytics, data science, and cybersecurity. Because for a company that's in payments, cybersecurity and preventing bad actors from stealing data or impacting the customer experience at a terminal where there potentially could be a fraud, that fraud prevention and fraud detection is extremely important. And if we don't have the time to build those skills and that muscle organically, we will then go and acquire a company that has those skills and those capabilities. And so that's part of the talent planning at a broad sense. And then specifically, when we do the talent planning and the skills audit, every individual within the organization has a development card. And within that development card, we focus around what are the key strengths that individual has, what are the gaps that they have, the development areas. And we always look at, across the organization, where do we believe we need to invest more? And so the last year, for example, we found that the number one area that we still needed to develop was around communication and storytelling. And it wasn't the hardcore technical skills that you would imagine about AI, even though that's number two as an example. But those interpersonal skills and conveying messages, whether it's internally or externally, still prevails as a really important one. So that's sort of that part. And the final piece is really around executive development and leadership development. And we've done both a bottoms-up and a top-down approach to leadership development. And this is also part of talent planning in the broader sense of succession planning. So we want to ensure that our leaders at the first-time entry-level leaders are really being part and demonstrating and role modeling the Mastercard way, our culture, and equally from the top down. And so we look at two aspects of leadership. One is around the formal matrix structure that we have. And if you think about the basic elements of leadership development, people do things because they're required to, because your leader, where they sit on the hierarchy, is basically more senior than you, and therefore you follow. That's one dimension. But what we really believe and focus on is we want to inspire the workforce, which is more around the moral leadership. And so we try and blend those two dimensions, those two tensions around. You still need a structure, but you want to have individuals that are winning the hearts and minds of the workforce as well. And so part of our leadership development curriculum is to really bring those two pieces together in a very succinct way.
So a couple of follow-up questions on that. Really interesting. The storytelling piece. It feels like it's starting to be a theme that I'm kind of getting today. But where's that data coming from? So when you kind of do that process and you're kind of saying, okay, here are our skill needs, what are the inputs that you're kind of using in terms of data to understand what skills we're going to need, where the gaps are, and so on?
Yeah, so some of the data points will come from our own employee data that we have through these development reviews that we do. Second piece is around employee experience survey and pulse surveys as well. So, there was one question a few years ago where the question was around how equipped are you in describing the strategy to a friend, right? The company strategy, because we just changed CEO about 4 or 5 years ago. We had refreshed our strategy, and yet we found that many of our colleagues weren't able to really articulate the strategy. So that aspect as well was around both informing, but then how do you communicate that? So that was sort of another data point. And the final data source that we use is also the voice of the customer. So we will hear from our customers as well, where we do periodical surveys with our customers around how well they believe Mastercard is focused around innovation or new products or connecting our solutions to their opportunities that they've got in the organization.
Excellent. And when you're doing that planning, what's your kind of time horizon? How were you thinking what we're going to need for 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years? How far are you thinking into the future as you do this process?
Yeah, so typically some of these pieces are more short-term focused. So a piece like communication storytelling, we can deploy resources relatively quickly to really upskill the organization. So we have, for example, a practical example, we have what's called Up on Strategy. So this is a series that we've partnered with our communications team. And we believe that this isn't just an episodic thing that we did 3 years ago, that Up on Strategy is something that's ingrained into the culture, that if there is a new acquisition or there's a new product or there is something about risk, this Up on Strategy series allows 2 individuals, 2 experts from the organization to talk about this and to be able to broadcast it en masse to the rest of the organization. So that's one aspect. So that's more short term. The longer term pieces are things like AI and building up AI literacy. So we have meeting-free days as an example every 3 months. And on one of the meeting-free days, this was last year, we had the AI takeover day. And basically we put together a series of resources which we then deployed out to the organization, where individuals at a self-paced approach could actually take these lessons about AI. But that's sort of the basic. What we've now done, we've built a guild. So we've got several learning guilds focused on particular areas like software engineering or cloud or cyber, whatever it is. We have now one specifically on AI that allows different proficiency levels to be trained. So if you're a software engineer and you really need to go deep in this, there are modules and there's training that equips and provides that learning for you. So yeah, we're looking at the short term, but also building out the capabilities for the long.
So actually picking up on that AI piece, because here at Wharton, they now actually, I think, are planning to start administering electric shocks if we don't mention AI at least once every 20 minutes. So I probably need to go there. But how are you thinking about what kind of skills people are going to need? We've heard prompt engineering was very fashionable, then everybody decided prompt engineering was dead. And so I think I keep hearing we're going to need new skills for AI, and I never quite hear what those skills actually are. Obviously there are some people who are kind of actually building the systems, but beyond that, how are you thinking about kind of how it changes the kind of skills people are needing at Mastercard, and therefore the kind of development and so on you ought to be providing?
Yeah, and I think one of the speakers this morning already mentioned about curiosity. I'm not sure if that's a skill or that's a characteristic, but I do think one of the areas that when you're interviewing and you're recruiting people is to really test out individuals' innate curiosity. So are they involved in outdoor activities, or what's the last book that they read? I mean, there are questions that you can ask to really determine about curiosity, because the pace of change is not going to get any slower. And I think this one aspect around not waiting for the organization just to hand you a training course, there has to be some innate self-discovery and learning. So that's sort of one piece. The other way that we've done it at Mastercard as well, we've launched a few years ago an internal talent marketplace. So this is sort of another aspect that we can also determine about building new skills and new muscles in different parts of the organization. So the way that internal talent marketplace works is that we have about 90% of our workforce now where they've uploaded their profile. So that's on one side. So it's all like the supply side, if you will. And on the other side is the demand side, which is managers that are uploading particular projects and now even jobs, but the projects in particular, that's what we really like about the internal talent marketplace, where individuals, if there is a connection between their skills or their interest and it's matched to a particular project, we put them in contact with each other, the supervisor and the employee, and we get individuals to work on projects and initiatives that are outside of their subject or functional domain. And we find that's another great way of building skills and reskills in different areas, and democratizes the access to talent across the organization. And so that's another aspect of work. So curiosity, definitely. But I think the other ones, Matthew, are things like problem solving, collaborative teamwork as well, I think is a really important one as well, because again, someone else mentioned the fact that you can't solve the biggest problems on your own. In fact, some of the biggest problems that organizations have had to face, and HR organizations as well, so navigating through all these complexities, your solutions, your outcomes are much better when you've got a cross-functional team, not just within HR, but from different parts of the organization. You're bringing those in. So the ability to work collaboratively across different parts of the organization, I think, is a really important part of success.
It's interesting. So as the technology develops more and more, it feels like we're doubling down on really kind of fundamental skills and the basics, rather than kind of looking for kind of these more advanced skills, the kind of capacity to engage with change. We have a few questions. So again, if you want to ask questions, if you go on the app, you can submit questions and I get to read them here. So look like a few that are very interesting to look at. There's one that I like here, which is, we talk a lot about the future of work. We've kind of seen tussles, frankly, over the last 3-4 years, particularly about where we're going to work. Sometimes it's seen as generational terms. And so there's a question here about, as you think about the future of work, how are you thinking about it, particularly in terms of what your workers in their 20s, say, are wanting, kind of their kind of people earlier in their career versus people later in their careers? How are you balancing that and thinking about where you want to go?
Yeah, it's a great one, because we do look at the multi-generational workforce that we have. We have definitely got a large contingent now of Generation Z workers. And when you look at the data from some of the research that we've done as well, this point about autonomy, purpose and mission are very, very strong. And so not to say that some other generations don't have it, just seems to be more pronounced. And this other aspect around that my work matters, this point about my work really matters is such an important aspect. And again, this sort of crosses boundaries of generations. But if we can provide that kind of data to our leaders around what is it that's going to get your team out of bed, motivated every day, one of the big factors is around that their work really matters. And finding projects or activities both within the day, but also some of the other activities that they have, whether it's community work or volunteer programs that a lot of companies do have, those aspects about the individual matters and the work they're doing matters actually has a profound impact in terms of engagement, retention, all the other pieces as well.
That makes a lot of sense. There's a question here that's really close to my heart. I mean, something that's bugged me a little bit about a conference over the years is when I look at who attends, it's a lot of professional services firms, a lot of kind of employers of kind of large numbers of white-collar employees, and often kind of applying people analytics to what you might call frontline employees has been more of a secondary issue. I think one of the nice things about the very tight labour market over the last 3-4 years has been for a lot of companies actually, that were worrying a lot about retention and engagement for their professional employees suddenly understood that this is a critical issue throughout the organisation. I'm curious, how do you think about managing those frontline employees differently, about kind of skilling those differently? Are you starting to kind of bring those populations together? Do you focus on them in different ways?
Yeah, so we look at it holistically. Obviously, there are particular needs that every segment of the workforce. So, if you're a customer care employee or working in the global business service center, then you're looking at providing as much of the tools that they need to be able to take friction out of their work. So that's sort of one area. If you're a salesperson, then again, you're needing up-to-date information to be able to be much more effective when you're going out and meeting your clients. And I think there are more tools that are coming out for things like on the sales side, like AI agents that provide sales coaching. So you can practice a pitch or a conversation that you may be having. And we know that there are some leadership coaching platforms that are coming out as well, where you can put in a particular scenario and this coach actually shares with you what you can be doing. So you've got to expand the whole continuum of your workforce, which is really important. And the only other thing I would say is that this point about, how do you know, or how does your board know about the culture and what's going on in the organization as well? This point about, is culture an asset or a liability in your workforce? We've put together a dashboard over the last 6 or 7 years, a culture health index, which basically looks at 4 different aspects of our culture, which works for us. So one is around people, of course. So you look at areas like employee experience survey, succession conversion rate. So there's a dimension there. We look at innovation because that's really important for our organization, for our customers. So how fast are we at moving products from concept to commercialization? How do our customers see? So there's a voice of customer aspect within innovation. We look at brand. So how is Mastercard perceived externally, both on a thought leadership perspective or the number of patents that our tech teams provide? And then there's one that we have, which is around our Mastercard way. So the decency quotient that we talk about. And so how we're caring and the well-being and work-life balance, all of those aspects. Some of the data that we collect is obviously internal. Some of it we then look at external data sources like either LinkedIn or Glassdoor to see how do we compare with some other best-in-class organizations as well. And every quarter, my people and analytics team produce the dashboard, which goes to management and the board. And if we find that on any of these particular aspects, there is a red or amber, it's a flag to management and to the board around, Michael, tell me a little bit more about what's going on here. Why have we seen that, on the innovation score, we've actually slowed down, or our customers are giving us some feedback on that particular aspect. So it allows you to drill down on particular aspects as well. So those things are really important. And every year we review the Culture Health Index to make sure it's fit for purpose and helps us with some of the things that you mentioned.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. There's a question here So I'll give the question and I'm going to rephrase it. So the question is, for an organization, how much upskilling occurs by upskilling existing employees versus changing employees? I kind of feel like behind that, there's the unspoken question around AI, which is, given all we hear about the opportunities, maybe we can automate away 40% of our workforce. If your workforce is sitting there thinking, these guys are very excited about AI, but 40% of us might lose our job. That's got to be a challenge as a CHRO. And so how are you thinking about kind of the nervousness that your employees have got to be feeling about AI and what it's really going to mean about job security?
Yeah. So I think we've done a pretty good job over the last few years to remove some of the anxiety that people had initially when ChatGPT was launched back in 2022. And so we took a decision early on that we would allow all our employees to be able to use and play with these ChatGPT or these generative AI tools, because we felt as a company that prides itself on innovation technology, it was important. However, we had to provide guardrails. So the first speaker that talked about governance, I think it's a really important piece, though you can't overlook that. The other thing is we have Microsoft Teams, and we have Copilot as well. And so we've been equipping our workforce in terms of providing them with the tools and the training to use these in the flow of work. And so when people see that these tools can actually help, not hinder their work, it actually takes some of the anxiety away. Now, we're also very straightforward as well, that there are going to be some jobs that will be re-engineered. But we've always had this history of where we have done that, we've also redeployed people as well. So for example, in our operations centers as well, where we've been able to deploy some of these AI agents and tools, it actually is freeing up the individuals because we train the individuals up and allows them to focus on higher order customer issues and allows them to have more time to deal with those than frantically trying to do all the data crunching, which they used to do, and only allow small amount of time up front. Equally for leaders as well, they're also finding that the way that we're beginning to deploy things like AI for performance management to be able to deconstruct 30 pages of multi-source feedback and prompting the tool to be able to say, distill this into a one page. What are the key strengths? What are the key development areas? What kind of feedback should I be focusing on? That allows the manager then to spend more time in actually having the conversation than flipping through 30 pages. So it's those kinds of things that takes away and demystifies some of the concerns that people may have had early on.
It's interesting. I mean, I think some of the kind of older research on productivity growth in organizations did suggest you got faster innovation when people were less worried about job security, when employers were kind of prepared to say people are not going to lose jobs over this. I did think of that yesterday when we had the presentation telling us that culture is a barrier and kind of getting that culture of innovation. So I think it will be interesting to see how we can provide enough reassurance to people that they embrace this technology rather than just seeing it as this is something that's coming for my job.
Definitely.
I guess another question I had, so we have a series of people analytics practitioners here. So you've been in the CHRO suite for a while. You are perhaps their most important customer. What would you like to tell them about how they can be more effective in their jobs in terms of what you like to see a people analytics group doing well to really have influence and drive the conversation forward?
Yeah, look, I think I've got a person on my team, Anshul, who leads up the people analytics team and is just wonderful. And he's been with us now for a couple of years. And I'm just in so much admiration for the work that you do and where you are. Because I think this is a really key moment in time where CHROs need you. They need data. Leaders need data. And so the point about what is the context of your operating environment in your organization? Because once you know that, then you're able to pull in the right level of data that is meaningful. So I say that because in the past, particularly if you're at the very early stages of making sure that your data is clean and what kind of reports are relevant, in the early stage, even for us at Mastercard, we used to produce all sorts of reports. Nobody would read them. And again, there was a lot of work there. So make sure that the focus is on what are the things that really matter for your business, for your leaders, and for your CHRO as well, because that's where you'll get the biggest bang for your buck. And I would say the second thing as well, you're in a great seat to be able to see right across the organization as well. And your ability to either anticipate and provide insights is probably much more than anyone else in the HR function. And so the ability for you to be able to connect all the various dots as well. So if your company is going through a restructure, or it's going through a major cost efficiency exercise, or the other side, you really need to push revenue. There are ways in which you can bring that data in to look at the yield or the the productivity of your sales force and a whole range of things, or be able to predict what may be happening next. Those kinds of aspects, I think, are really critical, and I think you're in the great position to be able to help the CHROs in our companies.
Great. Thank you, Michael. I've received so many ideas of just like different pieces of data to look at and the way they all kind of come together to kind of make decisions in organizations. So I found this incredibly useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.